Welcome back. It's 18 after 5. We are in the last hour of today here on eNCA channel 403. If you've just joined us, the gun that killed soccer star Senzo Meyiwa has been linked to accused number 3, Mthobisi Mncube. Now, ballistics expert Christian Mangena has told the Pretoria High Court about his findings when examining the fired bullets. In fact, he says the bullets recovered from the crime scene were fired from the accused firearm. Our reporter was in that courtroom, Mangqoba Mchunu, and he has been following proceedings earlier. Manqoba, a very good evening. Thank you so much for making the time. When we talk about the ballistics experts, just the information that came out of it, how explosive is it for this case?
Quite damning evidence, William, and this is because, I mean, for the longest time, we've been hearing of the possible links of accused number 3 to this particular crime. So we got a confirmation from the court that it was actually a firearm that had been recovered from him back in 2015 that was ultimately linked to the death of Senzo Meyiwa. So how this came about, you recall that Mthobisi Mncube, we've heard evidence that seems to suggest that at the time when Senzo Meyiwa was shot, he had been involved in crime, he had weapons and stacks of money, but also to the effect that he had dreadlocks just prior to this incident occurring. And in fact, even months after this had all happened, this is all part of the evidence that we heard also this week from the girlfriend as well as the landlord. And the picture that the state has been building so far as this particular accused is concerned, is that this is likely to have been the accused person that shot Senzo Meyiwa. So today we got to hear of the link between the bullet projectile that was found in the house, and we got to understand also what might have happened in that house. But what was important in all of this is that when they did the tests for this particular firearm back in 2015, those tests were concluded, and this firearm, the serial number, had then been established for this particular weapon, but it was meant to be destroyed in 2017. We heard that evidence last week from Captain Njali, who says this particular firearm was meant to have been destroyed, but because of the delays, it was not destroyed. So back to 2020, this is when now the investigators in the Senzo Meyiwa case now have an interest in this particular weapon. They have a person of interest who is accused number 3, and then they take this firearm and it's tested, and the bullets that were fired, more specifically, the type of bullet that was fired, that after the testing had shown that it had similar markings, which then suggest that this was the firearm that actually shot and killed Senzo Meyiwa. We got a glimpse of the firearm in court, a 9mm black pistol, which was taken around to the judge and the defense, as well as the accused, just so that we get a picture of what it looked like. Perhaps let's take a listen to how Christian Mangena came to that conclusion about the firearm.
I examined the fired bullets mentioned in 3.1 and 8.2, compare the individual and class characteristic marking transferred to them by a firearm components during the firing process using a comparison microscope, and found there is sufficient class and individual characteristic markings present on both exhibit and test bullets mentioned in paragraph 3.1 and 8.2, which indicate that the bullet mentioned in 3.1 was fired in the pistol mentioned in 7.1.
So in simple terms, what does this paragraph mean, 9.1?
Paragraph 9.1 means that the bullet that was recovered from the firearm, from the crime scene, was fired from this firearm.
And of course, Manqoba, if you watch TV and you've seen shows like NCSI, they go into detail when they paint the scene of how the murder was committed, right? And they use science, right? But we did hear this is what happened in South Africa at the time from the ballistics expert, saying this was probably how Senzo Meyiwa was killed. He was standing upright.
Certainly, William. And in fact, you recall that yesterday we heard evidence from forensic pathologist Johannes Steenekamp, who told the court that, Senzo Meyiwa, when he was shot, it's likely that he was standing up and that the gun had been pressed against his chest At that particular moment, his back was towards the door of the kitchen, which is why that bullet then ricocheted. And this is also evidence, that we heard from Mangena that the probability is that Senzo Meyiwa at the time, we didn't rule out the fact that there was a scuffle that ensued in that house. So he says Senzo Meyiwa was probably standing again with his back against the door, and at that moment his attacker had been just in front of him. And he says that even though it was a close range, sort of a shot that went off, it was not, a tight, sort of position that this particular person was. But also, I think what is important from his evidence, William, is that we got to hear that there were 2 shots that were fired, on that evening when this incident occurred. I think you would have heard some of the witnesses referring to 2 or 3 shots that had been fired. Zandile Khumalo in particular also spoke about a spark that seemingly hit her on the legs. And this we understand now is from that first bullet that was fired on the scene, which was fired to the floor, which had hit the tiles of the floor. The second bullet, according to Chris Mangena, is the one that pierced and killed Senzo Meyiwa. But let's take a listen to that stream of evidence.
The most probable position of the deceased during the infliction of the wounds was initially standing upright in the kitchen area behind the half-closed door, with his back towards the door, but not in contact with it. Bullet perforated the body of him and hit the door behind him. The bullet trajectory, as mentioned in 12.2.1, is slightly downwards. The shooter was most probably in front of the deceased, and the firearm was in contact with the deceased's chest. The possibility of altercation or struggle between the deceased and the shooter cannot be ruled out.
A big thank you to our senior reporter, Manqoba Mchunu, giving us and bringing us up to speed with all the proceedings in court today in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. Of course, proceedings continue tomorrow. Let's move on to this.